This video is to show you how to do foundation paper piecing. The first thing you're going to do is look at your pattern pieces and see how they're all marked. So this page has house number 18 roof, house number 12 roof, and house number 20 chimneys, and house number 20 roof. You can see that they're grouped together, and so you'll use both of these on house 20, just only one piece on house 12 and one piece on house 18. And you're going to cut those pieces apart, and you can use a rotary cutter, but you're just going to go just a little bit outside of that outside faint line. You don't have to be super careful, you just want to not cut into your shape. And you're going to then assign this to the proper pieces. Okay? All right. So let's look at house number 8. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make this roof section and the chimney section. So here's my pattern for the roof, and here's my pattern for the chimneys. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where my trim lines are going to be. So when you look at the pattern, all of the solid lines will be sewn lines. This little faint outside line out here is where you'll trim it. Okay, so I use one of these little flexible see-through rulers, and you're going to look at your pattern, and this one is actually numbered number 1, number 2, number 3, but I'm going to put number 1 on first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler into the bigger number. So 3 is bigger than 2. In fact, you know what? Let's just change these numbers. Get your pencil, cross that out, and write A1. And this one is A2. Then this one still remains A3. Sometimes when I print, the computer program doesn't print it properly. It reverts to what they would do. I like to do the roof in the middle. You can do it either way, but this is easier for me. Okay, so that's going to be, like, if you can imagine this, this is the roof, and then here's our seam allowance hanging out past those sewn lines. Okay, now we are going to work on the back, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find the fabrics that are assigned to this piece. On this one we have the roof, and then we have 2 background pieces. And you can see when you lay these on here how much bigger you're going to need than what is actually pictured. Okay, so you want them to be bigger. Okay, so I'm going to set those aside for just a second and show you how to do the chimney section. Here the chimney is number A1, the 2 background pieces are A2 and A3. And I'm going to fold into A2, and I'm going to put a fold in the shape of A3. You're never going to have folds inside the first piece. Okay, now I'm going to get a glue stick, and I'm going to work on the back. So I just kind of put a little bit of glue. This is just a glue stick, and I do want to put my fabric right side up if there is an upside down or a right side up. So I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to say this is the top of my roof. This is going to be by the house, so I want my flowers to be growing up. So sometimes you have to analyze the print, but sometimes it doesn't matter. On this piece, you're just going to put a little dab of glue, and you'll put this gigantor polka dot piece. Okay, now if your glue doesn't seem to stick this, take your iron and press it a little bit, and that helps it to stick a little bit better. Okay, let's do the easy one first. The next thing I'm going to do is, these are the seams that I'm going to sew. So I'm just going to fold this right here on that pre-folded line, and I'm going to take a pair of scissors and trim that off. I'm going to do the other side while I'm there. and trim that. Okay. Here's my other two pieces. This one's going to go here and this one's going to go there. This background is a great background because there's no up and down. The lettering goes all different directions. Okay, so then what I will do is, this is right here, the edge of my fabric, the raw edge of my seam. So when I sew this on, I'm just going to flip it over, put right sides together. Then I take it to my sewing machine and I turn it this way so that I can see where I'm going to sew. And I will start sewing out here, and I will sew right here, clear into this line. And then I'm going to sew the seam and put it off. And you're going to put your sewing machine down to a very small stitch length. So about 1.5 on my machine. So then do you see how when you sew that, and then you flip it over, there is your piece. Okay? You know what? That piece isn't long enough. So I'm going to need to cut a new piece because that is not long enough. One thing that you can do is you can make it come back here so that it'll be long enough. But the easiest thing to do is to just, you can adjust that seam. As long as it's an 1/8 of an inch seam, you're good. And I'm going to center it this way so that there's, you know, pretty much the same hanging out there and there. Okay, so I will take this to the sewing machine and I will sew that seam, and then I'll put this one on, flip it, sew that seam, and then I will press them. Okay? All right, let's move ahead to the roof part. The angles are always the hardest part. That didn't stick very well, did it? I'm going to quickly iron that. Okay, it is by far easier to trim this before you sew it. So you're going to just fold that over on that pre-folded line. And you can do this with a rotary cutter if you want, but I am much better with a pair of scissors on this because I tend to cut off this fold on my paper with a rotary cutter. So I just use a pair of scissors. And this helps you to visualize that this is the shape of your roof. That's the right angle. Now I'm going to put these on. And this is a little bit tricky. So what you're going to do is you're going to plop this down onto the part that it's going to cover. And then you're going to have raw edges hanging out on all sides. And then you're going to scoot it back here just as far as you can. And see right up here? I can go past that just a little ways because my seam is going to be clear over into here. So you can back it up. Then you're going to hold this onto the piece it's going to cover. You turn this, and we're going to trim this off right near that other trim line. Then when you fold this back, you can see that that is where it's going to be sewn on. So then when I would take it to my machine, I would just fold this over. And you're going to start out here, and you're going to sew all the way down that line and off the edge. And so then it's going to be like that. So I'm going to go to my machine, and I'm going to sew some of these. And then I will be right back. Okay, so I hope that you can see this. You can see where the stitching line goes. And when you turn it over to this side, it follows right along that printed line. Then I would take this to my sewing machine or to my ironing board, and I fold it over and press it, and you'll see that we've got plenty of extra fabric hanging out. That's what we want. Here's the one piece of the chimney. You'd press that, and when we look at this, you can see that I've got plenty of fabric. Okay, let's go through that angle thing again with the other side. So here's my piece that I'm going to put right here. I'm going to plop this down right over the shape that it's going to cover, and then I'm going to back it up to make the part that I cut off the smallest that it can be. When I hold this in place, I'm going to hold it over the part that it's going to cover. And I'm just going to fold on that fold line. And I will trim off right here. Now I've got that angle all pre-cut. Now all I have to do is go here and sew it. So I'll go sew this seam. Okay, so there is my roof piece, and I already pressed these because you need to press as you go. Okay, now you're going to trim this. And I do trim with the rotary cutter and a ruler. Let's move this up a little bit. So you can cut right on this line, but it's more accurate to put the 1/4 inch mark on your ruler right on that outside solid line. And there you will trim, right on that little faint line. When you do this little end cut, you're going to want to line up this line on your ruler, this 1/4 inch line onto your pattern. Okay, so there's my piece. It has my seam allowances on it. You never want to trim that solid line. Never do that. You always want to trim a 1/4 of an inch past it. Now I'm going to pull off the paper, and it's very easy if you just kind of fold it along those stitching lines. You're going to pull off that paper. If you get it in little tiny spots and it doesn't seem to want to come out, get a pair of tweezers. Now this is ready to sew onto the top of my house. On this house, the windows go at the bottom. We're going to put a quilt block right here. So here's the quilt block that we're going to put on it. Okay, so we can see that this is going to fit right there. You just do right sides together. And since these patterns are drafted by a computer, if you just do your quilter's 1/4 inch right across here, it should match. And this roof hangs out past the house anyway, so it will be a perfect match. And then you would sew your chimney section. You trim it off the same way that we did here, a 1/4 of an inch past that solid line, and tear off the paper and sew it on to the top here. Actually, I think it goes this way. It wouldn't matter if you put your chimney on this side or on this side. No worries. Okay, so that is basically how you're going to do your roofs. And those angles seem to be a little bit intimidating, but they really work well. I'm going to show you that one more time. So here is another house. Roof piece, the house. These are the two pieces that I asked you to put aside and save. These are printed the wrong direction, so in your kit we gave you a new piece. Just fold this in half and cut it with a pair of scissors, and then you can press them. We're going to glue onto the back. You can always tell that the pieces are in the right spot if they sort of fit, if they're too big, you know. They need to be about the same size as your paper. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to fold these back, and we're going to trim right next to that fold line. And then here are our two roof pieces, one there and one there. So what do? We're going to plop it down on top of where it's going to cover, and we're going to scoot it back so that we're only cutting off a small amount. And if you ever wonder if this looks normal, check the angle, hold it again and fold it down and see if mine did slip a little bit. So try and keep it as straight with the edges as you can. So hold it really tight. And then you can adjust this up and down to make sure it covers. So that will go on our right side. Let's do this left side. I definitely moved that one, didn't I? I do want that straight. And if they are not straight, it's really not that big of a deal. Okay. I will go sew these really quick. Now I'm going to press them. And there they are. So there's my two sides on there. Then I would just turn it over and trim it. Trim 1/4 of an inch past that solid line. One thing I should remind you of too is that when you take this to your sewing machine, you've got this held in place right there. You just turn it over and sew right along there. And that's how you do the angles on foundation paper piecing.